Hello everyone, welcome back to Social Audio Think Tank. My name's Jackson. I'm here in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm talking to my friend Josh. How are you, Josh?
I'm very well, thank you, and feeling slightly loquacious.
Well, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today, because I haven't been doing a lot of podcasting for the last few weeks because I've been working on another audio project, which is it's similar in production to podcasting, but it's going to have a different outcome. But basically, I've been spending a lot of time going out to people's houses and recording them telling stories about their childhood. And I've probably mentioned that I had a podcast, The Forgetting Curve. It's basically a project for that. But I wanted to talk about the interesting stories from getting people to open up and tell their memories when they've never talked into a microphone before. And some of them are quite scared of the microphone. And yeah, it's been quite interesting having some people. I'll tell the story. The first one I went to record, I said, okay, tell me your stories about childhood. And I said, well, first of all, as I always do, I said, tell me your earliest memory, because I found once people get going, like they often say at the start, I can't really think of anything. I can't think of any stories from my childhood. But once they get going, then it all starts flowing out. So starting with your earliest memory is just a place to start and to get it all going. And he told me his earliest memory in about 30 seconds. And then he told me another memory in the next 30 seconds, and then a totally different story in the next 30 seconds. And he was just listing off, it was almost like he was just telling me the headline of the story, and he wasn't telling me the stories at all. And I just had to stop him, and it was just, I had to say, I can't use this. I need your stories to be 5 minutes long and to have a plot. And it was so interesting that he just didn't know how to tell a story at all. I didn't know what to do about it.
So you were stuck basically with a guest that wouldn't expand on just the name of the story, basically.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. So, have you ever had that in interviewing someone?
No, because my only real interview show, I guess, used to be Braver by the Day. But now that's moving slightly more to a monologue. At the moment, at least, I'm looking to do a lot of interviews soon with a select group of people. But I actually, because of the type of show that is, where it's very heavily, I guess, expertise-based, I'm pretty selective with the guests. And a lot of them I actually know personally. I've spoken to them in day-to-day life, or I've, listened to their own podcast, or I've read their books or their blogs, or they've seen their videos on YouTube or whatever. To me, I've kind of already ruled that out before I even think, hey, that's a potential guest for my podcast. So no, I haven't. And it sounds like it would be really tough, because it's a failure as a producer and a podcaster to expect every person that might have a good story, or has a good story in them, to be able to articulate it the way you would want. And it's also just the frustration of that moment when you realize, hey, this person can't get it out, isn't helpful for them either. That just maybe compounds the problem of, hey, this guy wants me to tell this story, but I don't know how to. What the fuck does he want from me? So, I mean, it's kind of a failure from both ends, but really in the end, I don't know how to, I didn't know exactly how we were going to approach this topic today, the Loquac-isode. And yeah, I'm not sure how to get someone talking who doesn't want to talk. Like how would you get, I don't have any problem talking about a myriad of things, but how do you get your friends, I guess, to tell you more details about a story? Or how do you get someone in your family to stop skirting around the details of a story? That would be whatever skills you've built up in your life of getting those kinds of stories out of people. I'm not even sure whether they would help, because you have so much more background context with that person that they can trust you. Whereas someone that you're meeting, like Jackson is for the Forgetting Curve, that you might not have a long history with, you probably can't go too personal with them to get them to talk. That just adds extra complication. So I guess, what did you do? You must have done something, or did you just not use it?
For that one, I've got to be honest, I just can't use it. It's going, straight in the recycling bin. But you had an interesting point there where you said that the people you talk to are usually, you already know before you even get to talking to them that they're going to be a good guest. But then you said that you also had a chance to talk to them personally and get to know them a little bit before you actually interviewed them. And I think that's probably for anyone listening to this who wants to some tips on how to get people to be good interview guests on their podcast. I'm going to say that's the first key, is to get to know them a little bit and to sort of tell your story and say what you want from them and what you expect from them, I guess. But not, I sort of, the tricky part for me is I walk into someone's house with my microphone and I have to do that entire process in 5 minutes while I'm plugging the microphones in. So it's sort of really compressed and it's tricky to get that across to them. But that is, luckily for me, that was my first interview. So I had to learn quite a few lessons between that one and the second one, which is to go in and while I'm setting up the microphones, I just do not stop telling them over and over again, you can't give me too much information. Just tell me all your stories. I want you to try and get me to be able to imagine myself in your story. I explain to them over and over again, this is what the project is. This is what I want you to give to me today. I need you to give me as much detail as you possibly can and just put me in your story. And that's been a lot more helpful in the recordings that I did after that first one. But there was also another thing I noticed in the subsequent recordings that you sort of mentioned as well, that there's a thing with people, with your friends and family, when they're telling you stories, you sort of, maybe you know where the story's going and you can prompt for details or you can fill bits in. And that's a thing that I found with subsequent recordings where it's been two people. It's been maybe a brother and sister, or another one was a mother and daughter. And the other one was great to say, and then this happened, or no, that's not what happened. This bit, it filled, and they just fill in that bit and they keep the story rolling. And I think that's the really great bit, is when someone's got a microphone in front of them, even if they have recorded with a microphone before, or if they haven't, I think it's probably the same either way. You sort of don't want to stop. You don't want to stop the story and just think about it for a moment. You got to just keep talking. So for someone doing that on their own to fill in the story, if they reach a point in the story where they don't really remember it, or they don't remember the full details, they'll just move on. They'll skip it. They'll just say, okay, here's the next bit of the story that I do remember. When there's someone else there to fill in the gaps, then it makes it a lot easier. I'm not sure what the lesson is for other podcasters doing interviews, though. I guess that's maybe for them. They've got to be able, if they get to know their guest, actually, that's probably it. They get to know their guest. They've done their research on the guest. And when the guest says, that's the end of my story, that's all I can think of for this, they jump in with the next question, or they jump in with what they know of the story and what they can fill in for themselves.
That was really, really insightful. And there's a few things in there that I wanted to expand upon. One thing I think is really effective is to know your potential guests. I mean, you don't have to know, like if they're a physicist, you don't have to have a degree in physics if you've got a specific question you wanted to ask them. But if it's someone that has a general understanding of the same sport or the same comic books or the same basketball players or the same collectible cards or trucks or trains or whatever you're talking about, try to find a story they've told before that was really good and get them to start with that. And it can be anything. And if it's someone that you haven't spoken to before, maybe you need to, as a podcaster, start out with only interviewing people that you have a background with. So you can develop your own skills first of getting people to tell you stories. Because if you're going in cold and you haven't got those skills as an interviewer, I think that's part of lumping it all on the guest as sucking is almost just a cop-out. Most of it's probably because they are not comfortable enough to share openly what you would like them to get to. And I think that's an interview skill, not a lack of skill as the interviewee. So I think if you're new and you think about interviews, either find people that you are aware of their background and maybe get them to start off with a story they're comfortable with telling, and you kind of know where it's going like you would with someone you know personally. And or you need to make that person feel really comfortable, which is my next point. When I was recording something for Jackson, and I'll try not to make this sound too sad or depressing, but I think he knows where I'm heading with this. I told a story about when I lost my mum to cancer when I was a kid. And I've never really told that story to anyone outside of I've talked about it with family and, past girlfriends and that sort of stuff, or really close friends that I've made, like post all that happening. I've never really told that story on a podcast or an interview or anything like that in any detail because I felt like it was kind of like using my grief for content of a show, which, and that kind of felt a bit sucky, and I would never do that. It almost felt like I was, I don't know, using a story of, that awful part of my childhood and the years that followed to somehow make a show better or gain an audience or appeal to people or whatever. It just felt wrong to me. But Jackson took me out of my normal podcasting setup, which is usually pretty elaborate, and I just talked into a little microphone into a Zoom, whatever, H6, into a handheld microphone in the park, and he didn't say anything. And I told that story about as well, and hopefully I didn't sound too emotional and or sound like I lacked emotion. I was trying to keep it together, but it was taking me out of what would feel like a pressured environment where I had to perform, which would be sitting at home either on Skype or sitting with a mixing board and boom arms and all that kind of stuff. He took me to an environment where I could quite easily have had that conversation without having a microphone, which was sitting on a bench in the park near my house in Box Hill when I lived in Melbourne. So that is something else that I would advise, is find a place where you think or that your potential guest will be more comfortable. And an easy example, and a less depressing example, really, would be if you know that you're after a guest who sounds like they do a lot of their interviews on the phone, call them on their phone, on Skype or however you want to record the phone call. Don't ask or force a guest to know mic technique or to know not to handle a microphone too heavily when you're interviewing them. You've got to take out all of those barriers on their performance and make it feel to them like you don't expect them to be masters of speech and masters of delivery. I don't know if that makes sense. I probably just got a bit lost there, but try to make the environment people are in just feel comfortable, and you have to really cater to them.
Yeah, no.
Like you might not be able to get someone to have Skype and have a great microphone and have perfect sound. They might just say, I've got 15 minutes, call me on the phone, or it's not going to happen. And as a producer, you just have to do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because when I've been sourcing the guests, I always give them the option of saying, you can come to me because I work at Southern FM, so you can come into the radio studio, which would be great. We've got a nice little studio. It'll be soundproof. It'll be really super clean audio. Or I can come to you. I've got a mobile setup. It's not going to be quite as good, but you'll be in your home. You'll be in a place where you feel comfortable and you feel safe. And it's a place where you will have told some of these stories before, and it'll feel safe and familiar. And every single one of them has said, yeah, come to me, come to my house, which is great.
That's awesome. And if for someone to do that too, I think there's an underlying assumption there that they trust that you're going to do the right thing by them with the project, with the pressure you put on them, with the end product, that they're happy to invite you into their home. There's kind of an inbuilt trust there, which you might have to make sure you don't violate. Obviously, if someone invites you into their home and you record it and you cut it out to make it sound like they said something they didn't say, the 60 minutes thing or whatever, misquote people. Obviously, you're abusing your trust as a podcaster there and the honesty that the medium's kind of known and respected for. But yeah, I think that what Jackson's saying is absolutely right. You need to go to where people are if you're going to have shows with guests, and an environment where they're more likely. Like, I would prefer to hear a great conversation of two guys, 5 feet from a bunch of snooker tables where you can hear beers and stuff getting dropped on the desk. I'd rather hear that and hear a great conversation and a natural conversation than two people who clearly don't want to be in the same room as each other that sounds like it was recorded by NPR. I'd prefer that, because in the end, the content is going to be so much better. Like Jackson being a bit more of a, audio engineering person probably wouldn't love that. But in the end, if there's nothing of value in the actual content, I don't think it matters how good it sounds. Particularly if the guest seems uncomfortable to your audience, that's going to make every single person feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, for this project, I have the luxury of being able to put in sound effects and music to sort of mask any stuff that shouldn't be there, or if there's any too much room noise or something like that, I can hide it a bit underneath the music. But there's also, with the setup that I've got, and I think we talked about this before, I've got the AT-2005s, and I've really noticed it on the recording that you mentioned in the park. And then I got back, and you wouldn't know it was in a park. It didn't sound like, I think there was bikes going past, and there were a couple of kids playing nearby, and you wouldn't know it from listening to the recording. It could have been done in a studio. So pick the right microphone as well. Go get yourself some AT-2005s.
Yeah, definitely, that's a good point. To be able to make it work for the guest, you need to have, I guess, the gear to make it easy. And that might involve some kind of solution where you can record phone calls too. Because I know that I've missed guests that would have been great for DIY Music Movement and for Braver by the Day, because I had this idea in my head that the sound and the production had to be this incredible sounding thing instead of getting incredible content that's valuable for people to listen to. Because a lot of people just are intimidated as soon as you say, do you have a Skype account, or do you have a microphone, or they tell you that they want to use their Apple or Samsung earbuds or whatever, and you make a big fuss how it's not going to sound good when, they might just be more comfortable 10 emails earlier than that saying, okay, we can do it on the phone. So you don't want to talk people into something that is going to make them less comfortable than they could or should be. And that's probably all I have to say about it. So make your guests comfortable and try to know as much about them as you can. Don't go in there. Basically, the more you know about somebody, the more they're going to respect that you've taken your time and you value them as a person that has something to say. That will definitely help too. Do your research, I guess, is what I'm getting to.
I think my final point, I don't want to go on about it too much more, but I spoke to a friend of mine who's been worked as a film producer, and he's seen people doing film interviews, and he said that sometimes you just got to be, if the person is, like, if they're fidgeting a lot, and I think that's something that you've had to deal with from me in some of our earlier episodes, you have to just stop them and say, just stop it, because if you don't stop it, I just can't use it. It sounds terrible, or it looks bad, or whatever. And that's something I've had to learn from. I should have done that in my first interview where he wasn't telling me the stories. I should have said, just stop, because if you keep going, just telling me 10 seconds of a story, we're both just going to waste half an hour, and I'm going to walk away and not use your story, which is exactly what happened. It was just a waste of time and effort for everyone involved. And if I'd had the confidence to say, just stop, then, and explain to him exactly what I was looking for, it would have been a lot better for everyone.
I think that sounds like a pretty good plan. So anyway, mate, I guess that'll probably do for today. So for today's show notes, go to Social Audio Think Tank and search Loquaciousness in the search bar there. Or you'll see this episode somewhere on the front page there, or on the page called Podcasts. I think I've got I will have every episode there on the one page, which will be a clickable SoundCloud file from memory. So yeah, socialaudioThinkTank.com and search Loquaciousness, or just go to the tab Podcast and you'll see the episode there. And yeah, enjoy your interviews. And I guess the same things can appeal to your co-hosts, that there's just going to be weeks where your co-hosts are on and weeks where they're off. So that might be a conversation for the future, but you just have to be understanding. And particularly with co-hosts, I guess, you might have to do the heavy lifting one week because they might do it for you the next week. So we might talk about getting co-hosts to talk when they don't want to as well in the future, which might even be more troublesome, because if you upset them, you might not have a show anymore. So that might be a
Yeah.
big subject for the future. So cool, mate. And I'll see you later. Oh, sorry, at Joshua C. Liston on Twitter for me.
And that GX Jackson.
Excellent. See you later, people. Bye.